Demin versus Edgecombe tonight. What super scintillating diaper dandy has the distinct advantage? Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. We're crossing it over here. We're going to have Jake Hatch from Locked On BYU. We're going to talk about Demin versus Edgecombe tonight, as well as how these two teams who were kind of picked to be two of the best in the Big 12 this year have floundered a little bit. As we look towards February, we'll preview all that for the game tonight. And then I sat down with Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12. Going to catch you up with a big problem that is happening now around college football that we all need to be aware of. That's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Let's toss it to my conversation with Jake Hatch. Here with Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU, crossing things over ahead of a big basketball game here on this Tuesday night. The Bears traveling to Provo. Not a great spot for them last year. This was one last year at the Marriott Center where Baylor was actually playing well going into that game. And it was like, hey, if they can go and beat a BYU team in an atmosphere like that, the sky's the limit. Well, they didn't. They did not. And the limit was the second round. Which was further than BYU. If I might add, we're going to look at these two teams, but first I need to go kind of talking heads. Before we look at the two teams, let's look at the two stars. And it's Egor Demin. I almost said Denim again there. And I've watched the kid play all the time. I almost said Denim again. And VJ Edgecombe. They both come in as guys who were lottery picks before the season. Very highly touted freshmen. Both international guys, but through some different routes there. And you look at the numbers, and I would say both these guys, it feels like haven't played their best basketball yet. Maybe at least just from a pure statistical standpoint. VJ's starting to come around. We'll talk about him in a second. But first, Jake, I want your assessment, your full honest assessment of Demin so far.
Honestly, it's incomplete because he missed a full month due to a knee contusion that knocked him out for the month of December. He finally came back at the start of Big 12 play, and quite honestly, Cam, he's been in a slump shooting-wise until this past game. BYU needs him to be a threat from the perimeter, and obviously his NBA aspirations, they are contingent on him being able to actually be a shooter, because we all know that the NBA, it values shooting above all else. Everything that Egor Demin has in his tool belt is NBA quality. His court vision, his size, his ability to set his teammates up both in the break and in the half court. He's got all of that. But the biggest thing is, can he shoot consistently? And finally, this past game, it finally came out. He started getting back to what he was doing early on in the season. And if that continues, kind of what we mentioned about VJ Edgecombe, where he's starting to come into his own, we could see the back half of this Big 12 slate be the Egor Demin show, because BYU needs him to be at his best if they want to make the tournament.
This could be where it starts. This really could, because I don't know, quite frankly, if Baylor has a guy that can guard him. They don't have that athletic wing that's kind of a good, both ways, two-way guy that they've had so much in years past, whether it be Matthew Byer or Jalen Bridges was that guy last year. I think Jalen Celestine does some good things for them, but we haven't seen them, honestly, we haven't really seen them play a wing this good, first off, and this talented, I should say. Maybe not quite put it all together yet. And then from there, you got Jason Asamoto, I think is a promising freshman who could get out there and guard him just size-wise. But this could be like a good launching pad for Demin in terms of the matchups he's going to see in this game tonight. Because with him, I see a little Chet Holmgren there. I actually see a little bit of unpolished Jason Tatum there. I don't know how crazy that sounds to you. I watched Tatum play, obviously, almost all of his games in the pros as a Celtics fan, but I watched him play a lot in college, and he was more polished at that point than Demin is now. But with him and Holmgren, I just see, obviously, that length that you can't teach, but the smoothness of that game. Like when he's cooking, it's really tough to stay in front of him.
His ability to turn the corner and get to the rim, he can get to his spots whenever he wants, but the biggest thing for him is he doesn't have the body of a Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum is a thick, And this is when he even played in college. He had the body that would allow him to hang with anybody who wanted to get physical with him. That's kind of the one thing that Egor is still dealing with, is the fact that people want to get physical with him. He gets knocked off his spot a little bit. But when he decides to put his head down, he has proven his ability to get to the rim, to get to the spots he wants to get to on the court. You want to see more of that. You want to see him assert himself and become the player that could be a top 10, top 5 NBA draft pick. And this is a stretch starting with this game against Baylor, Cam, of 8 of their next 9 games for BYU are quad 1 games. So if they want to make hay and essentially put their resume together for the NCAA tournament, this next month and a half, roughly, it's where they're going to have to prove it. And if a guy like Demin can really emerge, become the force that BYU needs him to be, that's going to give him a major opportunity to punch their ticket to March Madness. But he has got to be the guy. I hate to say it, but he is the key to BYU's success or failure this season, it looks like.
And to kind of go off the point of, how his offensive game is, it's tough for guys coming from anywhere at that age to really be assertive when we get to Big 12 play and we've got teams mucking it up there. Sure. And especially coming off an injury that kept him out a month. Do you think you're starting to see the strides in that part of his game, come to fruition a little bit?
I think so. Now, it's 1 game sample size. They played Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's a bottom tier team, it looks like, in the Big 12. But he shot the 3 ball confidently in that game, unlike what we'd seen for many of the games before that. It looked very unconfident when he would step up to shoot one of those threes. So the one thing I'm looking forward to is seeing, okay, is what he did against Cincinnati replicable against Baylor? Scott Drew, he's got a very, very good team and a very cohesive unit, especially on defense. Okay. I'm interested to see what they do to defend him, because the other thing is BYU is going to have a guy who's also got aspirations of being an NBA draft pick in Cannon Catchings, who's another potential one-and-doner. They may focus on a guy like Egor Demin to slow him down. Well, that opens the door for a guy like Cannon Catchings to step up. So this is a game. Everything I understand, Cam, in talking with BYU Sports Information Department, is there are dozens of NBA personnel that are going to be at this game. Well, you got 3 potential first-round picks in Egor Demin. We'll talk about VJ Edgecombe in a minute, and also Cannon Catchings in this game. You're going to have a lot of people showing up to watch these guys and see how they compete, because, to your point, Egor has got the size, the athleticism, and the court vision to really hurt Baylor. But I am interested to see how they counter that, because what I've seen from VJ, I've watched plenty of him play this year, is he is a guy that when he decides to take over a game, he very well can do it. The problem is he's been too passive at times, and that's kind of the same issue we've seen with Egor Demin at points.
You absolutely nailed it, and you took my transition right away, because I was going to say, no, this is good, because it's like if you're looking for something of what, how Egor Demin can turn a corner here, look no further than VJ Edgecombe. I know they're not the same player. They're both freakish athletes, but not the same player. And we were saying that, as recently as a week and a half ago, of like, is this as good as VJ gets in college? You know what I mean? Yeah. And by no means has he been a bad player or a negative or anything like that. But you're just like, man, underwhelming. Puts up the highlight reel dunks and then does a lot of little things well, but he's supposed to be a top 5 pick. He's supposed to be a superstar. And we're starting to see that a little bit. Yeah.
So can I ask a question though? Because I look at his minutes totals, 35, 34, 38, 41. Are they redlining him already at Baylor? Are they playing him too much? Is he hitting a proverbial wall in your mind? Maybe is that slowing him down a little bit?
That is an interesting question that I've only thought about the last day or two, because I think they did do it with Utah legend Keontae George. Yes. I think they did do that a little bit, and because he was their only point guard. I'm not so sure. I honestly think it was a confidence play from Scott Drew of like, hey, whether it takes you 2 games or 2 months, you are going to be a focal point of this team. We're not going to kind of baby you to it. So that doesn't mean that they haven't put him through too much yet. That doesn't necessarily mean that, but I think that's what the play was. And honestly, you talk about a guy playing with confidence, and it's finally come through about the last week. And I honestly, this might be, propping him up too much, but just knowing VJ and like that personality and what everyone talks about, he was probably too much of a team guy to start, if that is such a thing, of like,
Well,
I'm going to defer to these guys because they're the leaders on the team. Where in reality, it's like, VJ, you are the best basketball player on this team. And we've got some other good ones, but you could take over a game here.
He's averaged 25.5 points the last 2 games. So it sure feels like he has emerged from, as you mentioned, kind of that shell that he was in. And if that's going to continue, we could see 2 guys, if they truly have turned the corner, both Egor Demin and BJ Edgecombe, we could see a classic match between these 2 to see which of these 2 guys is the best. And the fun part is for both Baylor and BYU fans, you could be looking at 2 guys you could be watching for years to come in the NBA starting in April.
This is what Provo, Utah brings you. This is what Big 12 basketball brings you. Yeah. We talked about the phenoms. Now let's talk through the teams. Who is going to win this game tonight at the Marriott Center? Let's break that down next. Today's crossover episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 insufferable teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, betting the coin toss, tails never fails, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to final whistle. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you're going to score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Big one tonight, Jake. I mean, obviously we talk about the type of dandies, baby, that are playing in this one, but more importantly, these 2 teams, man, these guys need a win. They need a win like the one that's being presented to them in this game tonight. So before we get into kind of the breakdown, I have to just interview question ask you, what is BYU's best win this season?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say the best win is actually the most recent one against Cincinnati. I know that Cincinnati is not probably the best team that BYU has played this season, far from it, quite honestly, but BYU struggled through a really, really tough first half against Wes Miller's squad, and Cincinnati likes to really grind in their games. They had 10
last year, yeah,
they had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half, and BYU was just kind of like, okay, kind of sleepwalking through this. Let's see what they got in the second half. Then they come out. Cam, they shot at 62% from 3 in the second half of that game, out-rebounded Cincinnati, limited them on the boards, really just locked down Cincinnati on defense. And that second half of the game against Cincinnati showed me, okay, when BYU decides to really lock in, and yes, they're shooting it well, this is a team that can compete with anybody in this league. The question now is, can they replicate that and make it a full 40 minutes? That's kind of the big question here. And Baylor's the first opportunity to do that, because as I mentioned, this kicks off the toughest stretch of the season for BYU basketball. And if they want to make the NCAA tournament, they've got to be 500 at worst in the league come the end of the year. They're 4-4 right now. So over the next 8 or 9, can you split those games, go 4-4? And a game at home against Baylor, it's got to, in my mind, be a must win for BYU.
Because you look at Baylor and they're in a similar situation. I mean, St. John's is the best win of the year, which the Johnnies have been playing good basketball recently that I had to eat my words about a little bit. And so you have 2 teams similar in the record column. BYU obviously a game under in terms of the Big 12 record, but these guys need some signature wins here to get into the tournament. And I don't want to say these opportunities don't come up all the time, but you're looking at a team at Baylor. If you're on BYU side, you'll get a team at Baylor that has not lived up to expectations this year. They're shorthanded in a sense. Jeremy Roach probably not going to play tonight in the concussion protocol, up in altitude, probably not going to play. And you're playing them at home. And you've got Demin back. You're kind of working them back into this thing. It's certainly a huge opportunity for BYU, as it is for Baylor to get a big time win on the road in the conference, because just as well as I do, with that quad 1 schedule that you guys have coming up, this could, BYU could win 4 out of 6 here after this. And then they're in the rankings. That becomes a very impressive win.
And that's got to be the hope for a BYU squad. And I know Baylor's here's the thing. BYU fans, I think, have been a little underwhelmed by Kevin Young and what he's accomplished so far, simply due to the fact that Kevin Young came in and has made BYU this recruiting powerhouse they've literally never been. They just signed the #1 recruit in the 2025 recruiting cycle.
Yeah.
with AJ DeBonsa. Obviously, when you do that, and when they get Egor Demin here, Cannon Catchings, some of the guys they brought in this past recruiting class, and then looking forward, BYU fans are saying, we got to be better than 500 in the Big 12. But I think that the thing is, this is a first-time head coach in Kevin Young. He's trying to get his whole thing implemented. He has one of his best players in Egor Demin missing an entire month. Dallin Hall, one of their other better players, one of their veterans, missed the first part of the season due to a toe injury. So it's been a makeshift lineup for long stretches of the season for BYU. And now finally, over the past 3 to 4 games, Cam, the full lineup has finally been available for Kevin Young to mess around with. And we're finally starting to see some of the rotations settle in here for BYU. From my perspective, you talk about Baylor, they're still a little shorthanded. And so BYU has got to be thinking, okay, no Roach. Baylor's coming in here a little undermanned where we were a couple of weeks ago. We got to take advantage of this opportunity and win this game. But Scott Drew has proven time and time again as a head coach, and he's one of my favorite coaches in this league because he does it the right way, in my opinion. He goes out there and his teams put on a very steady Eddie performance. That's the best way I can describe what Baylor does. And if VJ Edgecombe, if what he's doing over the past 2 games against Kansas State and Utah, if that's legitimately what VJ Edgecombe is capable of doing, BYU better watch out because he could pour it in Provo.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I do have to admit, I didn't do it last year when he was in the league, but I love Mark Pope's offense, man. I really do and did.
Well, and that's
go ahead.
Well, that's the thing about this is if you liked Mark Pope's offense where it was chuck a bunch of threes, Kevin Young has brought an NBA offense to the
game. Yes.
He said it in his press conference earlier this week, actually yesterday, that BYU I don't know if they're still there, but his analytics say that BYU was the number 1 team in both shots at the rim and from 3-point arc. They don't take mid-range shots. It's just not what BYU's offense is built around. They want to play a full NBA style offense, and they're implementing it. And the last 2 games against Colorado and Cincinnati, they've executed it to a really, really high level. Now, those are bottom tier teams in this Big 12 right now. Can you do it against one of the better teams? Much like you, speaking of Baylor, kind of middle of the pack right now. If you can replicate that against Baylor, that shows that BYU may very well finally be turning that corner, and Cougar fans may finally start to buy in once again, because I think a bunch of them had jumped ship at different points this season.
I'll ask you this in kind of a broader general picture here. You talked about Kevin Young and his recruiting acumen, and maybe some help from the local 5 up the street in Salt Lake. But hey, that's the game, man. Like that's how the game is played. So let me ask you this. I'm sure you've used this term and have heard this term when it relates to BYU basketball. With those things in place, NBA offense, NBA coach, and a whole lot of money coming in there, and back-to-back years of Demin and then AJ DeBonsa, Brockton's finest. Is BYU a sleeping giant?
They're hoping to be. Here's the deal. Kevin Young has made it very clear that he plans on making BYU an NBA factory. But the byproduct of that, I think from the Cougar fan perspective, is great. Bring in those one-and-done guys. Make them NBA stars. Get them off to the NBA. But you better win along the way here. That's one thing. BYU fans, they are a super, super loyal fan base, and they expect their teams to win. They love when guys like AJ DeBonsa talk about wanting to be at BYU. They love the fact that Egor Demin has bought into his time in Provo and is enjoying what he's doing. But they want the byproduct of all that to be winning basketball games. So if Kevin Young can ultimately go out there and win at a decently high level, I think year 1 BYU fans making the NCAA tournament, that'd be just fine. But then only goes up from there, because when AJ DeBonsa shows up next year, you're talking about a team that's going to have expectations. Sweet 16, Elite 8. BYU's never been to a Final Four, Cam. They have the moniker of being the team that's appeared the most in the NCAA tournament without a Final Four appearance. It's like 35 or 36 appearances without making the Final Four. That's going to eventually be the expectation for Kevin Young if he continues to recruit at this level. But BYU, they're in it. They're paying an NIL. They're competing for the best talent out there in the college basketball circuit. So yeah, with that comes massive expectations. But Kevin Young, he has been very clear that he's not shying away from those expectations himself.
I used to work for a summer league baseball team, Cape Cod Baseball League.
Okay.
And this team, they did win the championship when I was there, but they had their glory years a few years before, like 20 years before. And they said, yeah, we won a lot, but we didn't put anybody in the MLB. I was like, why do you guys care?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now they do. They put a bunch of guys in the pros, but it's like, you got to win, man. That's awesome. Like, I don't care if Baylor doesn't produce another NBA guy ever if it means they win national championships. Don't
exactly. That's the thing about this is BYU's put together a very NBA style coaching staff. You look Will Voigt and the different guys who are on Kevin Young's staff. They've all got professional backgrounds, and they operate this as a kind of an NBA team. Each coach has 2 or 3 players that they work with individually to make sure that they're operating at peak efficiency. And Kevin Young is just kind of this mastermind who his whole goal is to get guys to the professional level and give them that opportunity to chase their dreams. But once again, you've got to go out there and win, because if you're just producing NBA talent, but you're a middling Big 12 team, Cougar fans are kind of like, okay, great. What have you done for us lately? And so that you're right. That's a very good point. You want to see winning as a byproduct of this talent coming through these programs.
One last thing, real quick. I won't put you on the hot seat for prediction, but I do want what your X factor has to be in this game. What has to happen, and if this thing happens, BYU's going to win.
BYU's got to win the rebounding battle. Now, Baylor is a team that they will come in and try and control the tempo of this game. That's just kind of a Scott Drew staple of how his teams operate. But BYU's got to control the action. They got to control the boards in this game. I look at that Cincinnati game. The first half, BYU struggled mightily on the boards. Kevin Young said they went in at halftime, and all they talked about was rebounding in the halftime chat. They came out, and they rebounded just absolutely outside their minds. It's been a very good rebounding team for BYU, generating extra possessions. You got to have Keba Keita and Fousseyni Traore, as undersized as they are at times. They have got to win the rebounding battle. And if BYU can generate those extra possessions at home, that'll give them a major opportunity to win. You have an X factor on your side.
Yeah, rebounding is a big one. I guess I'll have to knock that off. Honestly, I think VJ needs to continue being the guy he's been the last 2 games versus kind of the breadth of the season. But I think more importantly for Baylor is going to be Rob Wright. Jeremy Roach not going to play in this game. That's just the Cam Stewart prediction. He's not going to play in this game. And Rob Wright has been pretty solid, although he's been kind of more loose with the basketball the last 2 games. And he did play considerable minutes in Stores when they played UConn, but this is like hey, we've got a big opportunity to win a game here on the table. He didn't start that game at UConn. Roach got hurt, getting a separate injury in that game. You're starting. This is a big time environment, Big 12 road game. Need him to be huge for Baylor. That's it for me.
It should be a fun environment. It should be sold out at the Marriott Center. So I'm looking forward to it, Cam. It should be an elite one. And if any Baylor fans are making the trip, enjoy your Cougar Tail on me. All right.
Yes. I've got to get the Cougar Tail, man. I went in 2022 and didn't get the Cougar Tail. Anyway, Jake Hatch, Locked On Cougars, one of the very best shows we have in this entire network, not just the Big 12. I'm Cam Stewart from Locked On Baylor. Oh, Jake, it's going to be a fun one. The following is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. That was the experience. Well, now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Co-hosting today, Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Thanks for making that show your second listen every day. We will start with the transfer portal, tanking integrity in college football. Now, players have learned no matter if they sign an NIL contract or not, they can unenroll from a school and just go somewhere else. And there isn't a transfer portal. There's no due process here. They can do whatever they want. We'll also talk Big 12 national championship odds. Utah. Utah. Las Vegas has them #1 in the conference next season. My God. And the #1 draft pick in the country. #1 draft pick is a Big 12 player. What does that do for the rest of the conference? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs that we love so. And then maybe Cam could afford a shirt that's better than whatever that New Balance thing is.
Crew neck. It's a crew neck sweatshirt.
Oh, I didn't know. It's the thicker material. What's the logo on the right there?
That's the most famous club in England, right there.
Dragon. Okay,
that's a live bird.
The transfer portal going away. This was a topic I talked about a little bit last week and didn't really explain in full. It's a Miami player, now a Miami player. He was at Wisconsin, signs a 2-year NIL contract. Then after the first year says, I'm done. I'm going to the transfer portal. Wisconsin says, nope, can't leave. Have to play for us. Ha, ha, ha. So he unenrolls from the school and just goes to Miami. NCAA puts out a statement being like, yeah, I mean, whatever. I guess you can just kind of do that. So as many people were like, well, this is just clickbaity, wild. The transfer portal still think it's not. If I'm a football player, why would I enter the transfer portal when I can just say, deuces, I don't go here anymore. I go somewhere else. And guess what? If I'm Miami or Oklahoma State or Texas Tech, I don't want to pull from the transfer portal. I just want to enroll a new kid here. It's that simple. No more paperwork. Yeah. Just welcome to the show. This is going to officially throw us into even further chaos.
It's amazing, honestly, that this has not been that this hasn't happened before. I guess because we're just starting to see. I guess it's because we're just starting to see the NIL the contracts out there. But make no mistake, this kid's going to play for Miami next year. Wisconsin's not going to win this case. But it just goes down to kind of the crux of this from the beginning of we as fans, we don't mind player empowerment. It was crazy what was happening to them before the days of NIL. You couldn't just if they were behind you in line at the fast food drive-thru, you couldn't pay it forward and order the meal for them. They couldn't order 55 burgers, 55 shakes, 55 fries. You couldn't do that. And now it's almost gone too far in terms of like you said. I mean, it's almost we're at a fugazi era right now. You could just do whatever. And Wisconsin has kind of fumbled the ball on this in terms of they make them sign this NIL contract, which actually isn't going to go into effect until maybe April when it goes before the House. This is where the people are arguing that yes, you should treat them as employees, but then there are the smaller schools that are like, we're not going to be able to keep up with that. Honestly, Drake, the thing that I've thrown out there is you get 6 years to play 5 seasons of college football. That's it. And maybe you make a special exception for our friends in Provo that have the 2-year break. But I don't think that's unfair of hey, you max it out however you want, make it JUCO, D3, whatever, sign whatever NIL deals you want, but 6 years to play 5 seasons of college football. After that, you have to move on, Alan Bowman. You have to move on.
Unless you go JUCO now, and then you get 4 years.
Yes, this is where it becomes even more convoluted because I didn't like that ruling to begin with. Again, it's a pro player empowerment thing, but it's one of those as a fan or obviously as a coach or administrator, you're like, how far does this have to go? Yeah. How far does this have to go? And the NIL contracts is a step towards that because obviously, if you're making money, that's going to tie you down to the school and that's the real world. That's the working world. The world of contracts and non-competes in local news, but until that goes into effect, there's nothing that stops a player from doing this. And it's so bad with the NCAA that, again, you're like this as a fan, you're like, this has gone too far, but how can you blame the player here? It's well within his rights. You know what I mean? It's how can you blame him for taking this route? It seems weird. It seems slimy in some of these cases, but the NCAA, nor the schools, nor the conferences can do anything about it right now.
Can I take you back to Case Keenum and when he was this young phenom at Houston?
Yeah, sure.
And Houston fans looking around the room going, it's going to be all right for 4 years. We're going to have a good 4. This kid's pretty darn good. And what's sad is there were those guys that played for the Arkansas Razorbacks when I was growing up watching them as a fan, where I thought, wow, what a freshman standout this Alex Collins kid is. He's really going to be something for us for the next 4 years. And you know what? He was. That's gone away.
I mean, I think about it this year, like Bryson Washington has this breakout year, and now as the fan, you're like, boy, I hope he stays another year.
Yeah.
Boy, I hope he's on the team next year.
Don't buy the jersey. Yeah, don't buy the jersey.
It wasn't that long ago that we had this. It was pretty rare to transfer, actually, if you were a big time player, because you had to sit out the year.
Right.
Jarrett Stidham was running practice squad at Midway High School. It wasn't a popular thing to do. And big time recruits, it almost never happened unless you had really fallen flat on your face. Sorry to step into that, but
my son, if God gives me an heir, will never know an era of watching a college basketball player or a college football player who day one walks on campus, gets to be the freshman phenom hero, and you think, wow, great. We're set up. I can't wait to watch this kid develop over the course of his time at my university, my favorite school. That era of football is dead. So when we ask the question of, is college football as we know it still alive? The answer is no. We will no longer have, wow. And some universities are going to, Iowa State has seen a great influx of retention of players they had. A Rocco Beck, Avery Johnson could be examples of this. Those guys are going away. Baylor right now. Sawyer Robertson, he is that. He feels like the kid who's been there for a couple of years, and now you can buy the jersey, and he committed to the school. He's a transfer portal product. I mean, even your transfer portal guys can certainly find a new home somewhere, but the era of, wow, can't wait to watch this guy the rest of my life, that's gone.
It is. And you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of like, people think it's like icky when we say that, of like, this is not the college football we grew up with, because they're like, oh, well, you want to go back to this and this and this. And we're like, no, but this is fundamentally, it's completely different, different. And basketball is an even better case of like, you just don't know who your guys are going to be from year to year. Every team's replacing 2, 3, 4 starters every single year. And it's obviously the case in football too. I mean, you talk about Avery Johnson as a guy you can grow at Kansas State. I feel like they did that with Will Howard, but look where he is now. He's winning national championship somewhere else.
The great Michael Qualls at Arkansas. The great Kiko Haidar, walk on. You know, those guys they don't exist anymore. They're not real. They're the real Fugazi.
Some would ask if they ever existed. Just hearing those names. Very special thank you to Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. We're going to be hearing from him later on in the week, talking a little bit of football from that conversation as well. You'll hear that this week. And thank you to Drake for having me on Locked On Big 12. I find this a fascinating story with the transfer portal, and one that we are going to have to keep tabs on going forward. All of us, this affects all of college football. It's just Wisconsin and Miami right now, but it affects all of us. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Give me your predictions on this game tonight against BYU. Who has the edge? VJ, Demin, who is it? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a ton. And we will see you later on today on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.